Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 18th, bi-weekly-ish working group LTS meeting. My name's Jeremy. I'll be the host today. Let me grab the agenda and put it into the chat. In the chat. All right, there we go. If you could add yourself as an attendee, that would be super awesome. If there's anybody that's new today that'd like to introduce themselves, please feel free. I think I know most of the faces here. We'll pause for a second in case anybody wants to say hi. And if anybody would like to volunteer to note, oh, sorry. Thanks, Bridget. Bridget's going to note take today. All right. So I put two topics on the agenda. If anybody has anything else they'd like to go over, please feel free to add them to the open discussion sections. The first one is the annual report feedback. Thanks, Bridget, for leaving some comments, and there were a few other folks that left comments. I think I've resolved all of those things. One of the action items kind of out of that I realized is that we need to provide updates to the sponsoring SIGs. So I thought it would be a good idea to chat briefly about what we want to summarize and what we want to provide as an update so far, and see if anybody wanted to volunteer for any specific SIGs. So we have a number of sponsoring SIGs, architecture, cluster lifecycle, case infra, release testing, and the SRC. If anybody wants to volunteer for any one of those things in particular, that would be really awesome. But at a high level, updates that we want to provide, I think maybe summarizing the data from the survey, and then maybe some of the blog posts that we have identified that would be good to write. Not sure what else to include. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas? Bridget, go ahead.
One thing I should caution you is I've run into this before when doing the SIG Cloud Provider annual report. They very specifically want things within the bounds of calendar year 2023. So any exciting things that we had happen starting January 1, 2024 are out of scope for this annual report and go into the next one, which means some of the survey results and other things are actually a little bit too
That's true.
new.
Yeah, that's true. That's in 2024.
So that's
Yeah,
why I
and
added some links to Jordan's excellent talk from 2023 and some other 2023 things. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
it's worth writing things down, even if it's a scratch doc for next year. And we can go ahead and tell our sponsoring savings about those things. We don't have to wait till February of 2025. But yeah, that's
Oh,
I always
100%.
get off by one.
100%. It just doesn't go into this annual report is what I was told when
But
I asked specifically.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't go into this annual report, but one of the operational things is that you did an update for your sponsoring SIGs. So that was the feedback I took away, is that we should do that in 2024, and we should highlight all the things, and start working on that now, so we don't wait until whenever. Oh, it's time for annual report for 2024. We didn't do this. So just trying to be a little proactive about that. Would it help to maybe start a document to kind of draft what that update might look like? And then we can kind of go from there.
Draft is always easier than thinking in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I thought they really cut down the length or number of questions, or I don't know. I thought it got radically simplified this year, so hopefully that'll be
Yeah, for sure. The annual report template was so much more compact this year than it was for 2022. I was pretty appreciative of that. I'm going to share this. So I just created a document. I'll share it with the working group, and we can kind of asynchronously collaborate on that. Okay, gonna make a doc here. Okay, so everybody in the mailing list should have access to edit that. I'll try to start putting some thoughts and some summary of the data into it so we can just have that. Does anybody want to volunteer to go to any of these SIGs once we have a coherent update that we want to share? I can do a release, obviously, but
I can do architecture. I'm not sure security response has a meeting.
I don't think they do.
I might just send them a notification that I'm doing it and invite them to maybe architecture or release. I'm not sure which of those would make sense, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And I know that they're aware of this just because of Mo's next doc, which is the next agenda item.
Yeah. Okay. I'll volunteer to do Kate's info too. If anybody after this meeting wants to claim any of these, feel free to mark it in here and then give us just a heads up. I think testing and cluster lifecycle. All right, let me see if Mo's going to join us. I don't think he is.
He had a conflicting
Yep.
commitment.
Okay. All right. So the second topic was I just wanted to bring Mo's document up again, see if anybody had any other feedback, any thoughts, if they had a chance to read it. And I can bring it up on the screen if we want to do it that way.
I have one comment about the commentary. It seemed like a theme was that there's always going to be a trade-off of increased testing costs. And I'm wondering if the gating of the increased testing costs is going to be a major motivator here, then maybe this needs to come in with like, good, better, best or budgetary recommendations. I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of wondering, exactly how much cost we want to get ourselves on the hook for in this proposal and how to define it.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I think that's the primary concern in terms of like monetary costs. I definitely think as there's some comments, it's really also the time for doing those extra reviews and making sure that those things are reviewed by all the SIGs. So it's just an additional manpower cost, people cost that is something that has to be accounted for. If you hadn't seen this, Jordan, the TLDR, I think, was Mo proposed doing CVE backports to release branches from the 15th through 24 months. So essentially, a release would end up with 2 years of CVE, 1 year-ish of regular support as it is today, and then 1 year-ish of just getting CVEs backported to them.
Yeah, I was asking a few questions. Didn't talk about Go version updates. I would like historically, I think about 50% of those have some security content.
Mm-hmm.
It's often irrelevant to Kubernetes, but maybe 25% of the time, a Go patch update like has a thing that like technically impacts us. So I wasn't sure if we would only, if this was proposing we only pick up Go bumps when they include security content that affects us, or if we include them all the time. If we update to minor versions, then that usually requires backporting other Kubernetes changes to adapt and be prepared for the Go minor version, which, so like this sort of says things like no other backports, only CVE fixes. It's like, but to take the CVE fix, you have to do a different backport so you can even build and pass tests with the new Go version. So yeah, I have some questions. It also says this CVSS rating is not relevant for backporting. I would be interested to know, like, if the backport is a big bump to a dependency and the CVE it's fixing is very minor, like, is there no consideration of the risk of, like, we're going back in theory like 6 minor versions at this point. It's like, how do we weigh risk of a dependency update or risk of a backport, which is actually a rewrite because the code that made the fix at head doesn't exist in the current form 6 releases ago? Like, how do we weigh the risk of a big dependency update or a rewrite fix if the severity of the issue it's fixing is actually very, very low? So I'll ask a few questions like that.
Okay.
The testing, I saw a lot of people asking about. There was one approach, a leaner option. I think you said a leaner option would be to not cut releases for these. I think that's going to be super confusing. Like, CVEs are always expressed in terms of versions of the library or binary that they impact, and so you would basically put it in a limbo state where it's like it's impacted by this CVE, but maybe it's fixed in a version that doesn't exist in the repo that the CVE is filed against. That's super
I
weird.
think it's confusing. I was trying to roll in comments that folks had given me offline, just to capture everything there.
Yeah.
I agree that I think it really clouds the picture about what is actually impacted, what's being delivered, how it's consumed, really.
I mean, anyone downstream who's patching beyond open source end of life already has this issue, right? Like, a CVE says it impacts Kubernetes 125 and below. It's like, well, we patched it, and so in our version stream, it's like 125 dot whatever the last patch version was dash GKE, you know, 1,030,000 or whatever. Like, we have a version that is identifiable where we can say this was fixed.
Yep.
Yeah,
same for us.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own build stream version, whatever suffix. Yeah, but if the upstream is going to be backporting these things, it seems super weird to not tag with releases.
I agree. Like, that's part of the value is everyone being able to say, we're Cube this patch, and all of us saying, okay, we all have the security fix.
Do you think it's worth widely sharing this beyond who has seen it already, or is there more value in discussing it and like addressing some of the points you just brought up, Jordan, before it's patched?
I don't
Opened up for
remember
more
seeing
feedback.
this. Did I
I don't
just?
think. Yeah, I don't think it's been shared anywhere really
Okay.
yet because we were
Um,
discussing it.
yeah, I mean, I think it's worth broadcasting more broadly if we want to iterate on some of these, like, pretty obvious questions first and kind of have like, here's the options, here's the pros cons of each, here's the one we think is the best for these reasons. That seems useful to have, just so you don't get like 1,000 of the same comment and then broadcast it out.
Okay. Has everybody else had a chance to take a look through this?
I haven't had a chance yet, but I will go through and add my comments here. Yeah, I think one of the biggest, and we run into this is when you make a determination CVSS rating isn't there, is just capturing that information so that people know we saw it, we skipped it intentionally for this reason. You know, it's this is in the code base but is not executed at all in our usage, right? That generally is a sticking point whenever you're going outside of the CVSS scoring. That's my experience.
Yeah, I think if it's actually not executed or linked, that is already carved out, saying, where was it? Only if the CVE directly impacts Kubernetes. So we do have symbol level determinations at this point, whether a given vulnerability is actually built into binaries. And so there's already some of that. And yeah, it is, there is friction there. It's like, oh, you have this CVE. It's like, we actually don't, because we don't even build that symbol in. So it's kind of a push and pull with scanners today, saying like scanners need to be better behaved and not as many false positives.
Scanners compete with each other on the things they identify. Therefore, a large amount of noise is good for them because they caught something that somebody else didn't catch. Is my experience.
We've had some success in, like, if we can demonstrate that a scanner is reliably giving false positives, like we've actually had some success at exerting back pressure to scanners to say it's not just volume, it's also accuracy, and what you're doing is actually noise. But yeah, I agree, it's tough sometimes.
There was some discussion a couple months ago about perhaps producing something like a VEX document that would help clarify to scanners that some things are truly not impactful. We've done an analysis and they're not impactful, and please don't report on this thing. It's not something that I think is super widely supported by scanners yet, but there's like experimental support in some of them for some of that might be useful later on too.
I do want to highlight Jordan's comment that's on the bottom right of the screen right here. I think you're 100% right there, Jordan, that the further back we go, the higher risk it's going to be, and therefore the trade-off or the reward had better be worth it. Because if we're going back N versions, and it's gonna, like you said, they gonna be basically net new retconning, like it has to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think about dependencies like XNet. XNet's probably the biggest one I can think of that is outside the standard library and regularly has updates with security implications, and basically just releases from head all the time. And they do issue tags, but the tags are just always at head. And so every update is just taking all the development that has occurred in that library. And fortunately, it's pretty stable, but we have occasionally seen bubbles where it regressed. And I mean, this is an existing issue we have on our existing minor branches. The only difference the further back you go is that you're going from even older versions of XNet and like consuming even more security content. Not security, even more like just normal development content. Yeah, I'm not sure what to do about that, but it's on my mind.
Yeah, agree. Definitely gets riskier as time goes on.
This didn't talk about sort of ripple effects of things on other projects that tie support windows to Kubernetes open source, so like other open source projects or vendors that don't have you know, extended support offerings, and they're just like, well, we support it through the open source window, or even projects in Kubernetes. I think like Gateway API. I'm trying to remember. I think they supported 5 minor versions specifically so that they could support all the open source miners plus 1 for good measure. And so they were like going above and beyond and kind of jumping through a ton of hoops and delaying how long they could wait until they could make use of like custom resource definition improvements and things like that. And now this would be like, haha, it's actually 7 minor versions. And they're like, it's 8 now for us. What are you doing to us? Like, yeah, like they could certainly choose not to support that, but I think a lot of people have said, well, here's what the open source supports, we're going to do the same, or just like one more to give buffer or something. And so this kind of like, does this transitively put pressure on all of them to slow down more and support more and cost them more?
Yeah, I think that's probably a very likely thing, especially if anybody ends up consuming these things. If we do releases and they're being consumed, there's probably going to be an expectation from end users that, well, this branch is supported. I can get releases still. Why can't I use X?
Yeah. I'm not sure where the best place to highlight
I mean, in the
that.
case of Gateway API, we work directly with some of those people. So, but yeah, we're not going to be able to do individual outreach to every project for sure.
Right, but that like that category of cost, I just don't like if we can describe the category of cost and then give specific examples like Gateway API, and maybe do individual outreach to get representative, like what gut check, estimates of what would you do here? What do you think it would cost you? Is that a pattern that we could recommend to other people? Just knowing how they would respond and what the options they see are.
I mean, maybe the safest place for them to start would just be, instead of saying any supported upstream, tighten down their definitions.
I
So
think
that
they
they've
do
scoped
specifically
it
say
according to
5
what they
minor
prefer.
versions today instead of,
Yeah.
but maybe not. I can't remember. I think they say 5 minor
Oh.
versions.
But if they're saying that as a proxy for what they think that covers,
Yeah.
I added that as an open question at the end. Can we describe categories of costs for ecosystem projects?
Yeah.
I think, can we identify ballpark figures for testing infra requirements? That's another good open question. That would probably be I think maybe both of those would also be good things to have some answer for before this is broadcast more broadly.
if we want unsolicited opinions about any of the other open questions, I think the 24 plus 2 is a trap, because every time you've given a number, people are like, and maybe 2 months after that, and maybe 2 months after that, and maybe 2 more months, just in case people procrastinate. I'm like, at some point you just have to pick a number. So
Yeah, I feel less less beholding to the 2 month buffer with a 24-month thing. Like the annual upgrade cycle is a real thing. Like maybe there's, we do our upgrades in January because it's after the holidays, like whatever it is. And so like 12 months plus 2 make a lot of sense to me. 24 months, like what are you doing? Pick a time in the 2 years and upgrade yourself. Yeah. There was a question about how 2 years was settled on. I think Ben asked it. I didn't see it.
I think it was just a number that was picked.
Yeah. This feels like if you give a mouse a cookie.
Yeah, he's gonna want 36
like,
months.
Why not 36? Why
Yeah.
not 60? Why not? I don't know.
I mean,
Like
if you asked most people how long they would like, they would say, I would like versionless Kubernetes, and I would like to never think about this again. So like, if we want to give the ideal amount of time, the answer is they never have to upgrade ever. And everything you've been doing to make like APIs cross compatible is taking us on a path towards that.
Right. And by like going in a direction where we say you can care about a specific version for longer and longer, like that moves away from versionless Kubernetes. That increases the value of a given version. And
yeah, that's why I'm saying like adding a few more years onto this, it wouldn't actually necessarily make people happier. It just lets them procrastinate.
Right. Well, if anybody has any other comments on that.
Oh, I thought of one more.
The
last, so control plane node skew. When we revisited that, we talked about supporting the oldest node with the newest control plane. And so by tacking more minor versions on here that are supported, it is no longer the case that the oldest node and the newest control plane that are supported work together. Like, yeah, this would not automatically expand the supported skew. So today we are in a spot where the oldest supported node and the newest supported control plane do work together, and you don't have to worry about it. So if you're on supported versions from open source, mix and match, as long as your control planes are at least as new, mix and match, and they all work together. If you want new features, you might need to upgrade, but old stuff keeps working. You're not going to break if you just bump your control plane up until the latest one. You're good, and that is no longer the case if this happens.
That sounds like a risk we may need to call out in documentation if we've ended up with documentation that leads people to believe that any supported thing is totes fine and safe and cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Not sure if the docs say that or
skew
not,
documents are very explicit about like 3 versions of skew, 2 versions before 125. But the motivation of the CAP was oldest node works with newest control plane so that you can minimize your node movement. And it's frustrating to see something that moves us away from that.
Capture that in the open questions at
Yeah.
the end too.
Thanks.
It's a really good one to keep in mind.
It's like this is like one of those wooden puzzle things where you have like 1,800 moving little parts, and every part like slots in, and another part slots in, and it slots in further, and like it's this ball of dependencies, and we're like, what if we took that piece in the middle and like yanked it an inch out, and everything else is like, ah! The implications are painful.
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing else springs to mind, but I'll give it another pass offline. Did we get cost, like estimate ballpark costs for the test infra stuff? Like I know it's that might be useful. I
Yeah,
know a lot
I
of
don't
work
think
with,
we have yet, but I think that's definitely a very useful thing to grab from here. I think the kids infra people are really busy, so I don't think we can go ask them to produce that, but we might be able to look at the public data that's being reported now for
yeah,
the Google and the AWS spend.
and
Make some inferences.
where we are in terms of our budget. So I know for a long time
Mhm.
we were about to overrun them, and we finally like sort of got to a place where like, yay, we won't run out of money before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Or credits or whatever. Similarly, like I think this does a good job. The stakeholders does a good job of sketching out like the areas and the work. Um, I don't know that we have estimates on cost.
Yeah, I don't think we do. I think so I think adding or getting an estimate of cost, at least like ballpark, would be good. And then we can maybe make some assumptions on like what's the minimum amount of testing that we would want to have for these things. Is it the same as a fully supported branch? Is it some sort of turned down set of things? What would be the most economical? But I think that would be good to have before this is broadcast more broadly to anybody to review and comment on. That's likely a comment that everybody's going to have too. Like, how much is this going to cost?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thanks for all of the discussion today. If you have any other comments you want to take another pass to this, feel free. We'll follow up with Mo to see if he has any, if he wants to address or comment on any of that stuff, and we can take a look again next time. All right. Have a great Tuesday. See ya.
Thanks.